Well, welcome everybody. We're here at Young Realty Academy again, and this week we're going to be focusing on how to find buyers. One of the biggest questions I get from realtors is where do you find the buyers? I think it's fairly simple in terms of finding sellers. It's fairly straightforward. Excuse me. One of the things finding sellers is you're looking for your for sale signs, you're doing the direct marketing, but really finding those buyers, it's kind of difficult because some of the agents are talking to me and they're having issues with sort of day to day capturing of these leads, creating more leads, creating buyer leads for themselves. So today the focus is only on buyers leads. We will get into finding seller leads in another presentation, but today is only about buyers. So this topic is called buyers. Where are they, and how can I find more of them? So the short answer to where to find buyers is pretty simple. They're absolutely everywhere. Everybody in real estate, when it comes to clients, when it comes to leads, when it comes to dealing with investors, when it comes to dealing with even renters at point in time, they will be buyers eventually. So the short answer is absolutely everywhere. The long answer to where are buyers? Buyers are a mythical creature that lurk anywhere and everywhere that there is a deal to be had. They'll give you headaches, turmoil, anxiety, but they'll also bring joy, happiness, above all else, a commission check, which is really the ultimate um, sort of goal for anybody working with a buyer. Working with sellers, it's almost uh, circumstance to have. You're going to have that commission check almost for the most part. It's guaranteed because you have the listing. But when you're working with buyers, there's not always a guarantee you're going to get them to close. But today we're going to focus on where to find them, how to have a large database of buyers, and make sure at the end of the day you're closing those deals and making them happy and ultimately getting paid for it. So if you compare looking for buyers as though you're a hunter and they're the prey, the best hunters in the world, they know their prey inside and out. And the best way to catch anything is to know their habits, sort of where they go, what are their routines, what are they looking for. And then once you know that information, it's easier to track them and to find them down. So we will get to eventually where the buyers actually are, but I think it's more important right now to know what the buyers themselves are actually looking for. Above all else, the buyer is looking for a good deal, or at least a relatively good deal to them. You know, most sellers, they have a lot of different reasons why they sell. It's not always about getting the best, dollar value for the home. There's a lot of different factors involved with it. But at the end of the day, most buyers, I'd say, well over 90% of buyers want to have a good deal or a relatively good deal to them. If it doesn't exist, they probably won't purchase it. So a good deal to a first-time buyer is going to be a lot different than a good deal to a full-time investor. And then everything in between that, those two sort of relative sides of the scale, obviously first-time buyer on one side and full-time investor on the other, everything in between them is obviously there's a scale. But for the most part, everybody, if you find a good enough deal, there will absolutely always be a buyer out there to buy it. So the example of the first-time buyer, working with first time buyers is a great way to sort of get if you're new in the business, it's a great way to work with purchasers, sort of understand how they look at the business a lot differently than somebody else. The challenge with first time buyers is there's a bigger time commitment to the agent and the client relationship versus somebody who has been in the business for a longer time in terms of an investor. So the challenge with first time buyers is they're going to need a lot of hand holding. They're going to need to be walked through all the documentation. Doesn't matter what they're signing. They're going to need to understand what it is they're signing, how to sign it, what's the relevance of all that. And then beyond all that, you actually have to show them many, many different properties as well. So, and I mean many, most purchasers I've worked with in the past, it's, they found the perfect opportunity in the first week, but, they just, because they're first time buyers, they need to see absolutely everything. So it takes months and months and months. And then you go back to the original one to purchase it again. It just so happens no longer there. You got to start the search all over again. So first time buyers are great to work with, but just so you're aware, it's very time consuming. It's challenging, but at the end of the day, they'll most likely be your client for life if you treat them well and if you treat them the way they need to be treated. So on the other end of the spectrum, we're talking about the full-time investors. So full-time investors are great in terms of time commitment. They usually require a lot less time. They're numbers oriented. They really look at value-based investing. They don't look at necessarily, what the bricks on the outside look like or what the condo amenities are. They really don't care that much about that. What they care about is cash flow, their yield, what's the capital appreciation, are they purchasing the property for tax planning purposes? There's so many different issues involved with full-time investors versus somebody who's a first-time home buyer who's saying, I want to buy a home because they liked the neighborhood or they liked the way the showing was in terms of the furniture and how it was laid out. That's the big difference between investors and first-time buyers. So I'm using the two dynamics because it gives you an understanding of, you're going to have to gear your approach to finding the buyers based on what these people are actually looking for. You're not going to market and target to an investor about what a house looks like on the inside because they really, at the end of the day, don't really care. So if you're marketing cash flow and yield and capital appreciation to a first-time buyer, they may not fully understand it, and they just want a really nice house with a nice cut lawn and very little to do to the property. So there's two sort of larger issues going on here. And the purpose of this presentation is to segment out the two sort of extremes to give you a better understanding of how you go about searching for these purchasers. So for everything else in between, when you're working with purchasers, we did an exercise earlier this year called the DISC program, DISC program. It's an acronym. And each of those letters represents an individual. So if you take away the extremes of they're a full-time investor or they're a first-time purchaser, and everything else in between can basically be categorized in these four main categories, the D, I, S, and C. What it's important to understand is when you're looking for buyers, you have to understand what that buyer is looking for in amongst itself. But you also have to understand how to capture that purchaser and relate to them so that you can build that relationship to get going, to get to the point where you're doing showings, and then you're actually ultimately doing the actual transaction. So a very quick overview and review of the DISC program is here. It's one page, and I'm going to go through this. But it's important to really take this program seriously in terms of the DISC review and really internalize it. And every single day, every single new person you meet, you need to go over with them specifically, not obviously to their face, but just understand internally how it works and what they are, and if you can recognize what they are before you even meet them, if it's on a phone call or something like that, it's a better way that you can sort of evaluate yourself and tweak your presentation to the person that you're speaking with. So the D-type personality, quickly summarized, they seek productivity. They're bottom line oriented. In summary, they just want you to get to the point very, very quickly. So if anybody knows me, I'm a very high D individual. I just want the facts and figures. I want it done quickly. And that's basically how you can remember who a D-type personality is. It's somebody who doesn't really care for sort of all the bells and whistles. They just want to know, what's the end game? What's the cash return? What's my capital appreciation? How do we get in? How do we get out? What are the details? Let's get this done. That's what a D-type personality is. An I-type personality, they are sort of like the fun, happy-go-lucky, socializing type person. That relationship with that I-type personality, you're going to be going out to lunch a lot. You're going to be doing a lot of drinks and socializing. And, the real estate is sort of a secondary component to the actual building of the relationship. So it's important that if you're interacting with an I-type personality, it's important to focus on the house, of course, but at the end of the day, you really have to build relationships first with that person because they're going to base their decisions on how well of a relationship they have with you, not necessarily with the house. So an S-type personality, they seek acceptance and they do not like change. These are, it's difficult to pinpoint a specific type of person, but if you've ever dealt with anybody who's been stuck in a situation where, they have to sell a property or they have to purchase a property, but they're too strict on getting rid of their existing lifestyle, that's the type of person that an S-type personality is. They're very slow to act. They're going to take time. It's going to be months, if not years, to change these people's minds. And if there's anything that happens in the market in terms of a shift or a change, it's very difficult to work with the purchaser. So that being said, S-type personalities are good to work with if you're a very patient type person. A high D individual like myself clashes a lot with the S-type individuals. So the Ds are very quick to act and S's are very slow to act. So if you are a D-type personality and you come across an S-type purchaser, understand that you're going to have to be very, very, very patient, or potentially refer off to somebody who is more of an S-type personality or somebody who gels well with the S-types. I and S's, they get along very, very well. The D's and the C's get along pretty well as well. So the C-type personality, they seek accuracy and documentation. They love the paperwork and graphics and the market reports we put together. These are your accountants, your lawyers, the people who are very specific and detail oriented. If they walk through a property, they're gonna have to know all the A, B's, and C's. They're gonna need to know what furnace, who has manufactured the furnace, when it was installed, when it was updated, if it's insured. They're gonna need to know absolutely every single little detail of every single component of the transaction. For me, I enjoy that detail, but at the end of the day, it's very important for me to sort of get on to the, get onto the actual purchase, get onto the next opportunity, get onto the next purchaser. And the challenge with a D and a C is that one needs all the detail, and as long as the D can provide it, it's actually a really good relationship. So that's a very, very, very quick summary. Like, we took almost an hour to go through this DISC program earlier in the year. So if you don't have that and need that, just let me know and I'll get you that program. So, purchasers, where are they? This is I can't say the number one question, but it is up there with the questions asked by realtors who are either coming into my office, emailing me. We have agents now across the country. I'm actually now coaching people, some of them in the States. It's always the same question over and over and over again. Where are the purchasers? How do I find the purchasers? How do I create the leads so I can get more people in my database, in my funnel, so I can create more business for myself? And earlier in the conversation, I said, where are the purchasers? Short answer is they're absolutely everywhere. If you understand the mentality of a purchaser, you can understand how to market to them and literally open up a world that it just doesn't exist to most realtors, because most realtors just don't understand where the purchasers are or what they're looking for. Some purchasers out there don't even know that they're looking for a property. And what I mean by that is, like, if the right opportunity came along, they would purchase it. They just don't understand they would purchase it yet because they don't understand what they're looking for themselves. So you, as a facilitator in the process, need to understand. You need to educate the people that are in your quote-unquote buyer's database. And when you have the ability to start doing programs that we're doing like today and things that you're going to be evolving in terms of your marketing, you'll understand that the more and more people get into your buyer's database, the easier it is to find these purchasers. So one of the first topics I always teach people in terms of finding purchasers, if you're currently working with sellers, every seller is eventually going to be a purchaser, because you're going to sell one property and get into a next property. And if you're just selling to move to a different country or city or somewhere in Canada that you don't work, then there's still technically a purchaser, right? You can always refer that person out to another realtor in a different city or a different part of the world. And there's some people who sell and they go into renting, but eventually they'll come back to buying, or even better, they'll come back into give you a referral because they'll be a client. So the first thing I always say is look at your seller base, look at your sellers that you've worked with in the past, and see if they want to purchase something in the future. Now, one of the other things is if someone's recently purchased, for example, a lot of realtors don't approach the people they just worked with in terms of purchasing, because they say, well, they just bought a place and I'm going to buy a second place. You'd be surprised how many purchasers would actually buy a second property if they understood the value of real estate, the way it can appreciate, the way they can get into a second property much easier than they can into getting into, the third or fourth or fifth one, which are much harder to do. So if you work with a first-time purchaser, a lot of the time they have these larger deposits because they've been saving up for years and years and years, and they don't realize what the cost of the real estate is. Sometimes it's less, sometimes it's a little bit more. But at the end of the day, most first-time purchasers I've worked with, they get so excited by the whole process that we get into them into a secondary property almost immediately, whether it's a new investment in terms of a condominium, whether it's a property for cash flow or yield. It was always sort of the next step. Once that deal was done, I'd go back to that purchaser and say, hey, look, now you've gone through the process the first time. Let's do this the second time through the investment world, and I'll show you how to invest in real estate that way. And if it was weren't working with first time buyers, I was working with my sellers. I convert all my sellers into purchasers, whether it be through a secondary property if they already bought something else, or it was a referral of somebody that they knew. And too many agents, or too often, most realtors don't ask their sellers and their existing people for the actual properties or secondary properties or investment properties or referrals. So it's very important to start with your database of people. I've probably said these two words more in the past 2 years to our realtors than any of the other two words. And I know I sound like a broken record, but some of the best and easiest and cheapest ways to market yourself for purchasers, for sellers, for tenants, for landlords, for anything is on Kijiji and Craigslist. They're both a great service they're both a great free service. Let's put it that way. So when you compare it to the other ones we're going to get into, they're not as good. But in terms of free service, it's fantastic. Now, it's important to understand if you're using these services, you're amongst, thousands, if not, tens of thousands of ads that are coming through Toronto or whatever city you're in every single day in terms of real estate, looking for buyers, looking for sellers, looking for properties, trying to sell this, trying to sell that. So the challenge you're up against is standing out from the crowd. So if you can somehow tap into who you're really targeting, it's important to figure out who you're targeting first and then put the ad out there in terms of Craigslist or Kijiji. Some of the biggest challenges of the realtors are they just put an ad out saying, I'm a realtor. Well, yeah, in Toronto, for example, there's 41,000 of the realtors. So you're one of tens of thousands. So it's important to figure out if you want to work with investors or first-time buyers or something in between. Maybe people are looking for secondary homes. Maybe people are looking for retirement homes. Who knows what they're looking for? But you need to figure out who you want to work with, what they're looking for, and then put an ad out specifically targeting that person on these free websites. Like we had this opportunity in Vancouver earlier this year with, it was an amazing opportunity to get in with very little deposit money down. So that is the type of thing you need to be advertising specifically to people who, one, don't have the large deposits, but they have the opportunity to get into real estate. Or you need to target that to investors, and you need to target to people who, you're sort of on the fence. You're saying, oh, I get into real estate, but it's just too expensive. So you need to say the marketing needs to be geared towards those people. But again, it goes back to it's very important of who you're actually trying to target. So one of the best and largest sort of databases of people out there is Facebook. I use Facebook very cautiously just because they say their numbers are they have 1 billion users on Facebook. Like I think my wife has 2 or 3 accounts. I have multiple accounts. My cat, of all people, has an account. So that being said, 1 billion users I would not suspect is an accurate number for Facebook. But let's say it's even half of that. Let's say it's 500 million users. There's no other database in the world that large that can specifically target ads to people who are looking for things. And the beauty about Facebook is that you can gear your marketing towards the people who have the similar likes and the similar usability of what they're looking for within their Facebook page. So if you have somebody who is looking for condominiums, investing condominiums, love condominiums, renting, investing, all that stuff, your ad will be targeted towards that person specifically. And if you can use Google AdWords and Facebook and some of these, even Craigslist and Kijiji, where you can pay for the ad to stay up front and center, it's very important to get that ad out there. And in terms of buying business, it's one of the best investments you'll ever make in anything you do. If you look at some of these pay-per-clicks that are literally costs, pennies to do each one per click, but if as you add these clicks up over time, let's say it costs you $1,000 a month for these pay-per-click ads, but you can generate one sale or even half of a sale, once a month. That is going to be a 500 to 600% return on your investment. And if you look at it from that perspective, it's very important to, one, do it, and two, make sure the ad is geared towards somebody who is looking for exactly for what you're selling for. One of the challenges with most people is they just want to put ads out there that they think will attract people. When you really have to put yourself in the shoes of the purchaser, So if you have the ability to sit down, just take 5 minutes, and say, what are you looking for personally in terms of buying? You're not going to want to buy an overpriced home in an area that's depreciating with no return in terms of cash flow if you're an investor. So there's no point in putting an ad out there. Just say, condo for sale in Toronto, because that's what's happening right now. Market's going down, cash flow just isn't there. Investors aren't investing the way they were investing. So there's no point of advertising that if the purchasers aren't looking for that. So that being said, what would you be looking for? In Facebook, for example, there's 3 components to all the ads. The first component, there's actually a program I'll send everybody attached to this email. The first component is basically the question that you ask the person, and that has to be short and sweet. Are you looking for a condo? Are you looking for a home? Are you looking for an investment property? Are you looking for a power of sale, or whatever it is that your question is to that person? It has to be very short and concise. The second component is a picture. The picture really needs to grab their attention. It has nothing to do with yourself or your logo. It has nothing to do with what you're selling. All it is there for, the purpose is to grab the person's attention. Okay, so be very bright, colors. It has to be really sharp. It has to be able to grasp your attention in seconds. And then there's a third component, which is basically a description of the ad. That description of the ad has to have a call to action. So call me today, or email me today, or sign up for our newsletter, or whatever it is that call to action is. It has to be in the description. Do not sell anything in that description. Do not put in pricing. Do not put in condo for sale, 10% under asking, nothing like that. Okay, you just have to be very sort of vague with the description, but to a point where it's very specific to what they're looking for. So you could say something like, underpriced condos for sale, looking for purchasers, call me today, or act now, or something like that. And you have to tweak it. The beauty about Facebook, the cost is so low that you can test so many different ads that it really makes it more efficient in terms of what marketing works and what marketing doesn't work. And you'll know right away. The only caution I say with pay-per-click when it comes to Google and Facebook, even like Yellow Pages, I think, has it now, and Craigslist and Kijiji, the challenge with it is you can spend a lot of money getting zero return if you don't do the ads effectively, one, and you don't track the response you're getting from those ads. So I encourage you to do it, but be very cautious on what you're actually spending your time on in terms of what you're advertising on, who you're trying to attract into your buyer's database. So another component of buying them, part 2, is paying literally for referrals. Now, in Ontario, you have to be very cautious. Ontario and British Columbia have passed, under the real estate laws, bird dog fees. It's been in place before I've been in the business. It's been a very long time. And what bird dog fees are is you are literally paying cash for a referral from either a purchaser, a seller, or a contractor, or somebody who's in the business, and you're advertising that you will pay them to give you business. And that's called bird dog fees. You cannot legally do it that way. You can do incentives. You can do, for your existing client base, you can still pay referrals. You can pay them through gift certificates. So all of that, in terms of bird dog fees, in your TREB guidelines and your RICO guidelines as well, under the Real Estate Business and Brokers Act, they are very specific on what is a bird dog fee and what isn't a bird dog fee. It's important to read those and get that in place before you start doing that. But I go back to investment return. So if you have the ability to figure out a way where there's an incentivized way to give you a referral from your past clients. So let's say it's like a $500 gift certificate to Home Depot as an incentive for your clients to give you referrals from somebody they know who may be purchasing something. That works to a point, but if you think about the actual return on the investment, it's $500. Let's say is the bird dog fee, which is pretty standard out there. Let's say the average purchaser in Toronto is $12,000. It's a significant return on your investment. The only challenge you're up against is, I was taught this early on in my career, you would never want a referee, for lack of a better word, to find out that they were referred to you for exchange of money. And the challenge with that is, when I started, I did that very, very briefly in my early career in selling. The challenge with it was true, because when the referee found out that they were referred to me only for a cash exchange, not for my skills and my sort of expertise in the market, they were a little sort of taken aback, and they didn't want to be involved with the program going forward themselves. if the referral was going to come, it was going to come because they really liked working with me. Two, I provided more value than they thought I was worth. And three, they really wanted just to give the person they're referring a great experience. And there was no issues with cash exchange in terms of, there was this misconception of why I was working with that referee. So just keep that in mind. It's a decent way to build some money, but I would not encourage you or recommend you paying for the referrals. So speaking of referrals, my absolute all-time favorite way to build any business, it doesn't matter whether you're selling real estate or you're selling socks or you're selling crayons or pencils, it doesn't matter what it is. If you can build a referral-based business, there's no better business in the world. One, it costs very little to do. You have clients for life. Once you're referred, your new referees start referring you other clients, and the business sort of takes on a life of its own. It becomes sort of the best business that you'll ever be a part of because you're really just there facilitating the transaction at that point, and the business is growing itself. The challenge with referring is you really have to be physically involved and sort of emotionally involved with your clients for a significant amount of time and always stay in contact with them, which I find most realtors just don't do. So you have to stay in contact with your past clients, whether it's through an email program, which again, I'm not a huge fan of, but it takes away that personal connection. But you have to at least call them once a quarter. You've got to send out information to them, information packages on what you're doing, what the market's doing, sort of how your business is growing, how, why you're different than anybody else. But most importantly, you have to ask for referrals. I've tested this myself, and I send out information packages with not asking for referrals, and then I send out the same information package to a different group of people, but I ask for referrals. I get more referrals from the people I've asked for. And it's like anything in life. You get what you ask for. And if you're not asking for referrals, you're not going to be getting them. So the challenge with this, though, and I always laugh because, when I teach people this, all they do is they call their past clients and say, give me a referral, right? So, if you think of anybody you've dealt with in the past, put yourself in their situation. They called you out of the blue and you haven't spoken to them in months, sometimes years. And they're like, look, I don't really care to hear what's going on or what's updated. I know I haven't spoke to you in years, but hey, give me a referral. It's just not going to work. So what you need to do going forward is, let's say you get a brand new client, they close this month. You have to call them this month. I used to do a 30-day, a 60-day, and a 90-day call. So 3 times in the first 3 months they purchased the property. And then I try a quarterly call, and I try at least twice, maybe once or twice a year to get in front of them face to face, whether it's a luncheon, whether it's just like a social get together, whatever it was. It's important to stay in contact with them. But that interaction, every time you see them, every time you talk to them, you're always asking referrals. Plus, you're always giving them items of value in terms of information on the market. How can they increase their portfolio? What are they doing in terms of maximizing rent if they own rental properties? What they can do to maximize the value of their homes. So it's important to give them information first before asking for information from them. But it's important to stay in contact with them over time. So Young Realty, we've created this Young Realty Client Care Program. So what we're doing is we're giving 18 contacts a year to your clients on your behalf. So it looks as though it's all coming from the realtors within Young Realty. And so we're going to be doing a once a month email program. We're going to be doing a quarterly mail out. So that's going to be similar to like a newsletter, for lack of a better term. That's going to be going out to your database of people, plus 2 personal calls a year. So that's either going to be on closing, or if they're selling, it'll be on that same day that they're sold, or transfer title. If they're tenants, if they're landlords, all going to be different phone calls. But they're going to be 18 minimum contacts a year from our program to your clients. But it'll look as though it's coming from you. So we're doing that on your behalf, which is fantastic. And it's just important that you guys get us the information when you're submitting deals, submitting transactions, that you give us at least their email and phone number where they can be contacted. Generally, we can figure out what the address is from the trade. But if it's not on there, please provide their address, their email, and their phone call so that they can be a part of the program. So I've recommended this book a few months back by Richard Branson. It's his latest book out. One of the things he really talks about and targets in the book is really how to change any business out there and how to become what he calls the customer's champion. Most referring businesses work because the people who are referring that person, they're so happy with the work, not necessarily because they just did the paperwork or the transaction, but because the experience that they had with that person ran so deep that they wanted to share that with their best friends and family members. And, Richard Branson calls it the customer's champion. Jay Abraham, he calls it preeminence. There's a lot of different things out there, but at the end of the day, you have to do the best for your client over and above what you'd even do for yourself sometimes. And, there's a lot of times where I've walked away from deals because my clients weren't being treated fairly. The deal just wasn't right for them. And I'd rather walk away from the commission and let my clients know that I did that, because if you tell them that's what you did because it's in their best interest, they are for sure a client for life, one. And two, they're going to refer every single person they know to you. No question about it. So if you want more information on sort of preeminence, there's a booklet that we gave out to everybody. But if you need it, I will attach it, if I can find it, to this email. If not, I will send it at a later date. But it will be available. It's called Jay Abraham's Guide to Preeminence. So it's a great book. And it's just a really good way to sort of get yourself back and reoriented in terms of becoming the customer champion for your clients. So to me, this last one that we're going to talk about here is the best surefire way to start building your buyer's database of people. When I see these signs, it's so evident to me. I'm either going to get a listing or I'm going to get a buyer. Either way, I'm going to make the phone call. Okay. Obviously, I don't sell much anymore, but if you are still selling or just starting out and you got time to do this, there's no shortage of these in the city of, doesn't matter what city you are in the country, North America for that matter, they are all over the place. It's almost 100% guaranteed that you'll get either a buyer or a seller. And it's the easiest thing, and it's basically like shining a light on the person saying, hey, I'm a buyer or a seller, so call me today. And what is that sign? It's an apartment for rent sign, or it's a FSBO, or it's for sale by owner sign. Whatever that sign is, it is saying to realtors and people in the business saying, look, my property's for rent, so call me right now. And you're saying, well, I don't want to work with landlords or renters. I'm looking for buyers. Well, if you think about it, for rent, even for sale, FSBO signs always give you a buyer. There's no question about it. And this is how. So I have this script, and you really have to internalize this script. So when you're calling these landlords, you're gonna say this script. You're gonna say, my name is. Obviously, you're gonna put your name in where it says realtor name. You're not gonna say my name is realtor name, but you're gonna say my name is, say, Joe Smith. I'm a realtor and a real estate investor. I'm not interested in renting your property. I am potentially interested in buying it. Are you interested in selling your property? Yes or no? So the question is, well, why would I talk to a landlord and ask them if they're selling their property, yes or no? Well, if they say yes, it's great. If you don't really want to buy the property, then you ask for the listing and tell them you can work with them to sell it on their behalf. And there's no rules saying you cannot approach landlords. If you look at the apartment for rent signs on homes, if you go into condominium buildings, there's all sorts of things saying properties for rent. So what does that tell you? That person is either either first-time investor who doesn't really necessarily know how to rent out his property well and effectively, or they have multiple properties and they're trying to do it on their own, and they potentially need some help. So I love seeing these signs because you can reach out to them and say, look, I'm an investor myself. I understand the market. I want to help you out, either sell this property or buy you potential other properties. So if they say yes, you get the option of having a listing. If they say no, and this is really what you're going for when you're calling these people, you don't want them necessarily saying, yeah, I'm interested in selling this, because if they're in that situation, they're probably not that motivated to do anything else. So if this is the most likely answer you're looking for. And what happens is, if they say no, it's the best answer you can hear from this person. Because if they say no, then you're going to say this to them. I understand why you wouldn't want to sell. We're in a very healthy and vibrant real estate market. Or you can come up with some other line there that goes to the specific area that you're selling in. So if they say no, you say, okay, I understand why you wouldn't want to sell. We're in a very healthy and vibrant real estate market. A little bit of information about myself. I work almost exclusively with investors. So again, if you're talking to a landlord, again, you call it a for rent sign. So you're looking for a landlord. They're most likely an investor, whether for one property or multiple properties. So I work almost exclusively with investors, and I help them grow their portfolios to create long-term, sustainable, and predictable growth. If I come across properties that fit your criteria, would it be okay if I send them your way? Now, you have to understand, nobody's going to pick up a phone and say, "Oh, hey, thanks for calling me. I'm going to buy a place today." That's not going to happen. So, but what you're doing is you're putting this person in your pool or your buyer funnel, if that's what you want to call it, and you're going to now begin farming this person month after month after month, and eventually you're going to start building this pool of people that you can tap into. Now, I always loved working with investors because most investors I worked with own multiple properties. They understood how real estate worked. They understand that they want to own as many as they possibly can own. And if I show them opportunities and different ways on how to get into multiple properties, they would buy it almost instantaneously. But it would take months to get them to that point. So, other people you need to know that will always give you buying referring leads. This is sort of a spin off of the for rent sign. There's a lot of times you'll call, be a property manager or a property management group. One of the best things you can do is get a hold of these people and say, "Hey, look, are your clients looking for more property that I have potentially they can purchase?" One, the property manager has more properties for them to manage, so they're going to be making more money. And you know, if they already have a property manager in place, they're probably a professional real estate investor, so they're going to want to see the opportunity you have for them. City Hall is always a good place to go, but I don't mean just City Hall, just show up at City Hall and hopefully find buyers. You need to go and build relationships with people who work in City Hall in terms of the bylaw officers, zoning officers, tax offices. They will know the people involved with sort of day-to-day real estate in the city. They'll know who to contact. They'll have buying people who are looking for opportunities. Those are the people you need to start to get to know. One of my best referring clients ever in my career happened to be a divorce lawyer. I worked with this lawyer for many years, buying and selling her properties, and building her own personal portfolio. Her business as divorce lawyer, part of it, obviously one of the biggest components of it, is the real estate component of the divorce. And you're either going to come up with one of two things: either you're going to have to sell the property, and there's going to be, it's usually going to be a pretty quick sell because they don't want to drag the thing on longer, or one of them's going to get out of the existing home. So you're going to be picking up a buyer there as well. So if you can get find a divorce lawyer who can you can build a business relationship with, it's always a great person to have to generate more buying leads for yourself. Mortgage brokers, it's pretty evident they work basically with everybody on the buying side. So it's very important that you learn get involved with a mortgage broker. Of course, your banker, contractors if you're dealing with investors, and realtors, of course. And you're like, "Well, I'm a realtor. I need to get other realtors." Well, you're not a realtor in Calgary, or you're not a realtor in Ottawa, or you're not a realtor down in Florida or in California or wherever you are. So it's important that if you build a referral based business outside of the city you work in, realtors are the best opportunity to find people who are doing the same thing you're doing. You need to build a relationship with these people and create a referring business with these people. And once you create that, again, it's just another stream of income that's coming in from a different source. And if you're working in Toronto, for example, you need to have referring arms out in different cities to say, "Look, we have opportunities in Toronto that you may not have in other parts of the country." Bankruptcy lawyers are a good one. The challenge with bankruptcy lawyers are people are usually in not such a great financial standing at that point, so the clients may be a little difficult to deal with. But that being said, they could also be downsizing, so they need to buy into something smaller. So it's always a good one to have in your back pocket. Networking meetings are always good. Rotary clubs, social events, meetings like that. It's a great place to pick up purchasers. But again, it's important that your sales pitch, your elevator speech for purchasers is really down packed. You need to know what that is. One of the things I used to do as well was actually a pretty good program. I direct mail program to target specifically purchasers. And what I did is the marketing it would be completely different than everybody else out there because I would say, "I'm not interested in selling your property. I just want you to purchase this new investment property." And I used to direct market if there was a new building project in a specific area. So again, a lot of people know me from working in College Park. So what I would do is I would send out direct mail of every building that was being built in the surrounding area to the thousands of people who live there. And I would say I could be your purchaser, your purchasing agent for this, and I'd give them all the breakdown of why they need to work with me versus going to the builder directly, because I'd save them on their, I'd save them on their tax, their HST, GST rebates. We would cap their disbursement and closing charges. We would sometimes negotiate price on their behalf. There's so many different factors on working with a buying agent to work with a developer. That's very important. You get that marketing out there for the people who are potentially interested in it. And of course, on your website is always a good thing as well. So the whole purpose of today is really to give you ideas of where the buyers are. I know I said the short answer is everywhere, and they really are everywhere, because even if you tap out of all the purchasers in all of Toronto, there's still millions of purchasers all around the world looking to invest in Toronto if that's the city you work in. And with that in mind, what you're doing today is you're using these techniques and strategies to build a buyer's database so that you can tap into it every single time you need to make these purchases. Or you need to, there's an opportunity that's come across your table. You need a buyer right away. It's important to build these buyer databases. So most buyers take weeks and most of the time months to be farmed and convinced to use you to be their buyer's agent. Be very patient. It does take time working with buyers. I prefer working with sellers, but that's just the way my business was designed when I was selling. But working with buyers has its own rewards, and if you have the patience and the time to work with buyers and develop those relationships over months, it's a great way to build a business. So if you don't use our client program, it's very important to have your own. So there's lots of different programs and software programs out there. We use Lone Wolf. It's a great system. It's free for any of our young realty realtors. MailChimp. There's so many different like Salesforce. All those where you pay for. They're usually like $50 to $100 per month. Those are great programs and services. And you really have to have this automated to make this run efficiently and run very well. So again, talking about your buyer's database. So not every buyer is going to buy from you, but they have the potential to create the business for you from referrals as well. So don't be afraid to ask for referrals. So as you're building this buyer's database of people, you also need to sort of build in to an automated system where they're asking referrals every single month from your buyer's database that's growing every single day and every single week. So your database for the buying side, again, when you're working with sellers, it's a very direct relationship. It's a one-on-one thing. You can manage multiple listings at the same time, and for the most part, they're all going to sell through, especially in a city like Toronto. But when you're working with buyers, there's no guarantee you're ever going to actually convince them to buy something. And I don't like when people say, "Oh, I can really sell them something." No buyer is going to buy something because you convinced them because you're a good salesman. They're only going to buy something if, again, there's perception that there's a good deal in it for them. So that being said, your buying database needs to be hundreds, if not thousands of buyers, that every time you're marketing to them, there's an opportunity where you can sell 5 to 10 properties to that pool of people every single month. Now, not everybody's going to be buying from you, but if there's an opportunity that comes up, recently there was a client of mine said they wanted to get into a property that they heard about recently, even though it sold months ago. And the only reason why they didn't find out from me because it's not a good opportunity. And when you can talk to the client today and show them why it's not a good opportunity, they'll understand your mentality as well. And when you're on the same page, it's a great relationship to have, and it's a great opportunity to build a big business. And again, buying for the most part is 50% of most realtors' businesses. So it's important to get all these techniques down. So there's also a program that are called the ABR program, or the Accredited Buyer's Representative program. If you're really serious about being a buyer's agent only, it's a decent designation to have. I had it at one point. They didn't teach me necessarily anything I didn't already know in the course, but you have to take the course to put the designation onto your website, your business card, and all that stuff. But basically what the ABR does, it teaches you how to sign up more people under a buyer's representation agreement. It shows you the paperwork from a buying side, which is it's a little bit differently, obviously, of course, from the listing agreement. So it just changes your mind, your thought process on how to create more revenue from the buying side of things. And this course is all over the place. It's all over North America. So you just have to Google it, and you can basically take it anywhere you want. So again, I'm always preaching and harping on you guys that you're not in the real estate business. You're in the transportation business. You are taking people from where they are to where they want to go. And you are the sort of the vehicle for that. And no buyer is going to go from 0 properties to 10 properties without understanding and learning something in between. And it's your role as a realtor, and if especially working with investors, to educate these people on how to get from 0 properties to 10 properties. And if you can start educating, again, you don't have to build your client database huge, but if you can teach the people within your current database to buy more and more properties, you're gonna obviously have that sort of, you're gonna have this residual income that's coming in month after month after month, because they're gonna want to buy more and more properties from you. But that being said, and I use this quote, and everybody knows I love using quotes. Um, it says, even if you're on the right track, you'll get run over if you just sit there. And it's really important that if you're on the right track of working with buyers, and you're on the right track of, you want to put all this stuff into place that we've already spoken about today, but at the end of the day, you don't take action and you just sit there and don't do anything with it, you're going to get run over by everybody else who's doing it. So it's important to take what you've learned today and put it into practice so that you can start growing and developing it tomorrow and for weeks and months to come. So that's all for today. And I'm going to send this out today for the recording. And then if you have any more questions, please just email me directly, and then we can go from there and grow your buyer's business.